All right, welcome on everybody. It's Salt City Hoops live postcast. We'll do a little recap of what's been happening since I've been gone over the past few games. Sorry, I've been missing a little bit of what's happening here. Of course, as soon as I start talking, Will Hardy starts blabbering at me in the background. I still had the broadcast up from, and they just started the press conference, and Will Hardy's probably going to talk about I don't know, maybe the 26 turnovers tonight. Let's check. Let's see what the final count is. 25 turnovers for the Jazz. 17 first half turnovers. 17 turnovers over the course of an entire game would be unconscionable. Like, it would be really, really poor to have 17 turnovers over the course of a game. The Jazz had 17 turnovers in the first half, and they still managed to only be down by just 10 or 12 points after first half because they were playing okay basketball when they weren't just coughing up the ball. But then they coughed it up a further 8 times, right? And 8 turnovers and a half is really poor. So you end up with 25 total turnovers. The league high of the season is 27 or 28, and the most turnovers over the past 10 years is 30. So 25 turnovers is pretty close to, some sort of like record-breaking territory over the past 10 years. And everyone was really to blame for it. Obviously, starting point guard Talen Horton-Tucker committed 6 of them. 2 of them were foot on the out-of-bounds line for three-pointers. A couple times he just dribbled the ball away. Lauri Markkanen had 6 turnovers of his own. He is a low-turnover player. I think he averages not even 2 a game. I think he's in the low ones for turnovers per game. I've quickly pull that up here. But he had 6 turnovers of his own, getting the ball stripped, just dropping the ball. He had a charge or 2, I think it was. And yeah, he's at 1.9 turnovers per game this year, which for his usage is remarkably low. You can always rely on him to not be turning the ball over, but he had 6 turnovers today. Other guys with turnovers, we had Kelly Olynyk with 4 turnovers. Kessler had 1 of his own. Ochai Agbaji played 28 minutes and had 2 turnovers. Got a turnover from Fontecchio. Get 2 turnovers in 23 minutes from Chris Dunn. Damian Jones has a turnover. Rudy Gay Rudy Gay's going to be on the turnover watch. He gets 2 turnovers. All that adds up is to 25. Just throwing the ball over the gym, and like it's a team that is as turnover prone as the Jazz. The way they infuriate you is the stupid, dumb ways they drop the basketball. So this was a turnover-laden game for a soft tanking Jazz squad, and that is my introduction. Let's talk about the beer we got. Favorite brewery here, Four Noses Brewing Company, frequent flyer member of the program. We got an El Jefe Con Leche Imperial Stout, 9%, lactose-based stout, and it's just the sugar from the lactose. So even those who are lactose intolerant can enjoy one of these. Coffee, cinnamon, vanilla, and lactose. This is a stellar beer, 9%. Well, we'll have had a couple of these to be angry about the Jazz this much on a season that seems to be lost after the trade deadline. So cheers to you and the Jazz on a Friday night. We got some great games going on otherwise tonight, but I'm going to yell at you about the Jazz for a little bit if you don't mind. That is fantastic. So, story going today, obviously, and over the past few games, I forget that, like, because I haven't been around for a little while, we do have some things to catch up on. Chris Dunn wasn't on the team the last time I did a broadcast, and with Colin Sexton out for injury, he has a hamstring injury that they're really trying to manage. That hamstring injury is in the same leg as the knee injury that he suffered recently, so they're really trying to make sure that the load on that leg is fine. Yes, Colin Sexton did participate in the skills challenge at All-Star Weekend, but I mean, come on, how much effort does that really take? But a guy of Colin Sexton's ilk, like, he kind of tries hard at everything. Well, unlike Jordan Clarkson during the All-Star festivities, really looked like he couldn't give a shit at all. It was just kind of having fun out there. And Walker Kessler, as the third member, was kind of in between that. But Colin Sexton, he comes back from participating in the skills challenge, and he's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't suit up the rest of the season. Now, that might seem extreme, but with the Jazz kind of doing this soft tank, they really don't want him at the end of the season to all of a sudden get some 6-month knee injury that goes into next season. I would not be surprised to see Sexton get completely shut down for the rest of the season, which would be really disappointing because he's just joyous to watch, and I don't think he contributes that much to winning basketball, right? Like, he is still learning how to be a positive difference maker consistently on the court. I think it's more about just, like, he's a developing player, and I like to see what he can do playing alongside Lauri Markkanen, whereas if Markkanen's not hurt, he's going to be out there. So maybe you can build a little something going into the offseason, because you lose games like this, it's pretty clear the Jazz are not going to play 500 ball the rest of the way, even though they have a lot of games against the Spurs, the Thunder, and that kind of thing. So it's a little frustrating to see that we'll probably won't see Sexton again. You'll probably see Clarkson come back, because it's kind of hard to hide like a bruised wrist or a bruised hand or whatever it is. Like, when he's healthy, he's gonna play, right? But with a hamstring injury, it'll be a little interesting. So Talen Horton-Tucker played at point guard for a couple games, backed up by basically nobody. But the Jazz were trying to manage it for a game or two. And then they signed Chris Dunn and Frank Jackson to 10-day contracts. Frank Jackson has been the Salt Lake City Stars' best player. He is a mild NBA veteran. He's played 4 or 5 seasons in the NBA. With New Orleans, most notably, is when he had some pretty decent success there. But he's kind of bounced around a little bit. But he's been trying to resurrect his career in the G League and having a great G League season. Chris Dunn, similarly to Frank Jackson, is trying to resurrect his career from the G League, but he is most notable for being a top 5 or 6 pick in the NBA draft, coming out of a 4-year career at Providence. Defensive maestro. He surprised me with how tall and long he is. I always knew he was a good point guard defender, but unlike a player like Shaq Harrison, who the Jazz have signed for a small spell in the past, Chris Dunn is actually, like, he has the size to guard wings, which actually surprised me. I've always kind of just thought of him as point guard guy, and now watching him kind of in person, he definitely has more size for it. Chris Dunn is trying to resurrect his career come after stints with Chicago and Minnesota, and he was injured in his last NBA stint with the Atlanta Hawks. So he really didn't play very much for Atlanta due to a pretty more of a nagging but serious leg injuries that he's had. So he's trying to resurrect his career with the Capital City Go-Go, and which is the Wizards G League affiliate. And unlike Frank Jackson, Chris Dunn is playing a remarkable season for the Capital City Go-Go, which is frankly a really fun name to say. So I'm probably going to try to find ways to say Capital City Go-Go as much as I can during this postcast. But Chris Dunn is slowly starting to refine his offensive game in the G League, right? Like, he is an A-level defender in the NBA, but with offense so poor, it's really hard to even justify, like, a minimum contract, right? Not only is he a non-shooter, but he was turnover prone, not a very good passer, and if he can't be a primary scorer like he kind of was at Providence at times, it's kind of hard to see, like, okay, what are you doing for me on offense except just getting in the way, right? Think Jared Vanderbilt, but better defender and smaller, right? And where there's value in being bigger, right? That's why Jared Vanderbilt will have a similar NBA career for probably a little bit longer, is that, well, Vanderbilt's defense might be worse. His size allows him to be, like, incredibly present offensively, whereas Chris Dunn, as much as I lauded his surprising size, he becomes a complete non-factor offensively that is really hard to build a functional offense around. That being said, Chris Dunn's past 4 games have been really, really something. So this will be Chris Dunn's 4th game with the Jazz. He scores in double digits each game. He goes for 11, 6, and 6 with 3 steals today. And I'm going to pull up his past 4 games because he has been frankly delightful to watch. Because I think what Jazz fans really like about Chris Dunn the most, from what we've been watching, is he has this defensive skill, not just energy, but real skill defensively, that these past iterations of Jazz teams we have sorely needed. We gave Shaq Harrison the 10-day contract. We've tried Trent Forrest at times. With Trent Forrest has maybe a little bit better pick and roll feel, and Trent Forrest was kind of learning that aspect, but Trent Forrest fucking sucked offensively. He was still a bad passer. He turned the ball over. He couldn't shoot at all, and the backup point guard situation was a complete mess with it, especially when Mike Conley was out with his hamstring issues going into the playoffs. Trent Forrest himself got hurt, of course. Like, there was a place for a player like Chris Dunn on the past iterations of this Jazz team. We picked up Daniel House off the street to give us any sort of credible backcourt defense, and Daniel House kind of has some good shooting capabilities, but right now he's not playing for Philadelphia. Chris Dunn had a real role, and so his 4 games with the Jazz, his first game was 17 minutes. He's playing backup point guard in all 4 of these games. He almost exclusively plays without Talen Horton-Tucker on the court, but there have been a handful of minutes overlap. So you get 11, 1 and 1 with 2 steals. You get 15, 7 and 8, nearly a triple-double. We're going to get this triple-double streak broken by somebody with a steal and a block. We get 11, 1 and 3 with 2 steals. We get 11, 6 and 6 tonight with 3 steals and a block. And then 4 total turnovers over, by my count, about 100 minutes, which is, that's pretty reliable backup point guard stuff. There's a place for him here. And I think Chris Dunn in this 4-game stint has reestablished himself as worthy of a permanent NBA rotation or at least minimum contract spot, which presents a dilemma for both the Jazz and Chris Dunn. Now, Chris Dunn is 29 years old. When does he turn 30? Right? He's 28 and he will turn 29 soon, I think is what. Yeah, so he turns 29 in a week or so, March 18th. That's 2 weeks. So Chris Dunn is already on the older end of things, but we're seeing with training regimens and things, I think you can say that, okay, the decline probably won't start until 32, 33, maybe a touch earlier, but Chris Dunn has a reliable arc to being a useful member of an NBA basketball team over the next few years. There's a place for him on a roster. Is a playoff team looking at Chris Dunn's last 4 games and thinking, like the Jazz should have over the past couple of years, that's a guy we should really think about acquiring for the playoffs? I do just realize that we have passed the deadline for a player. Well, a player can be signed off the streets to can be signed as a free agent to play in the playoffs, right? The issue is you cannot be waived and be playoff eligible. I'll have to fact check myself on that one. But so his 10 days expiring, so he becomes an unrestricted free agent after this. So where does Chris Dunn go from here? Does he want to sign with the Jazz in this sort of role, especially when you get, Colin Sexton coming back and Jordan Clarkson maybe re-signing with the Jazz? Or do you look other ways to get a more permanent fixture as a rest of season contract with a non-guaranteed next year, with a guarantee date that allows you to have some more financial security for the next couple years? Do you want to try to put yourself in a position where it's like, the Jazz probably won't be able to play me enough next year. Where do I go from here? Talen Horton-Tucker is still going to be on the team. Colin Sexton's still going to be on the team. Jordan Clarkson, we'll see if he resigns. So it's up to him, I think, if he wants to resign with the Jazz. So from the Jazz perspective, I think resigning Dunn mainly comes down to if there's anybody else in the pipeline that's kind of worth signing. Is there a player in Europe that they really want to get a look at? Do they want to just sign Micah Potter to a rest of season contract, or Johnny Juzang to a rest of season contract? I really don't know what I would do with Chris Dunn. I think there is a place for him in the NBA. You can see my tweets, man. I was very, very, very down on Chris Dunn at the time of the signing. Frank Jackson was young enough that I was like, all right, yeah, let's put him in a backup point guard. He can spell Talen Horton-Tucker and see what Frank Jackson can do as more of this backup point guard role back in an NBA setting, which I thought he was doing incredibly beforehand. Chris Dunn has, frankly, stunned me with his offensive acumen. I think his defense is not entirely surprising. He's always been just a delightful defensive player. His knack for steals, his knack for getting in the way of good shot contests, his read for switching. He's a very good communicator on switches. He's been very reliable defensively. The offense just feels like in control. Like he's got a good handle and he's got good sense of tempo. He's patient when he needs to be. He penetrates the paint when he needs to be. He has quite a bit of burst to him, but he's kind of selective in how he does it. So the question for me is like, I want Chris Dunn on the Jazz roster next year. What is it coming at the expense of? What is the opportunity cost to signing Chris Dunn for a rest of season or next year contract? I think it's another 10-day feels wrong in this situation. I feel like if I'm Chris Dunn and all I'm being offered is a 10-day from the Jazz, surely they're based on my 4-game performance. I've shown credible other teams that I'm worth a rest of season contract at this point. But maybe that's not out there. I don't know what the market is suggesting. And so if all Chris Dunn has is 10-day contracts, the best thing for him is to continue going in the environment that he is succeeding in, which is playing in this 20 to 25-minute role off the bench where Colin Sexton probably isn't coming back pretty soon. And if Jordan Clarkson's out there, it probably makes Chris Dunn's role look even better, right? Where you can credibly start Jordan Clarkson as your starting point guard, and that's now who I'm remembering is spelled Talen Horton-Tucker. His first couple games was Jordan Clarkson before he got hurt again with his hand. So I really enjoyed watching Chris Dunn. I hope, and frankly, I hope this isn't the last time we have to see him. So that's that. I'm surprised. I have had to do a 180 on Chris Dunn, and I'm happy to have him, and I'm happy to have watched him, and his steals were fun, and I hope we get to see him again. So that's Chris Dunn. We'll see what happens. They'll have to make a decision on him. This was his 10-day is expiring, as is Frank Jackson's, frankly. So we'll have to see what happens to Frank Jackson and Chris Dunn going forward. Frank Jackson's in the city, right? He'll go right back to playing with the Stars if needed. So I don't think Frank Jackson's going anywhere. You can only give 2 10-day contracts to a player. You cannot continue stringing them along with 10 days the rest of the season. So we'll see what happens with Chris Dunn. If you held a gun to my head, I would give him the rest of season contract with the non-guarantee going into next year. I think he's worth having on the roster for depth. He's a guy that you don't need to play every game. I think he's established himself and has made enough money in his career that he's not going to be upset if he collects some DNP CDs next season, right? Let's say you have a fully healthy Jazz squad that is looking to kind of make the next step or kind of be like a credible 40 to 45 win team. There's going to be nights where the team is fully healthy and Chris Dunn doesn't play. I think he's not a guy that you'll piss off in that situation, and a minimum at his veterancy level is actually a fair bit of money. And I'd like to keep him on a non-guarantee. And the reason I keep saying non-guarantee is because you can still bring in bodies to camp, and if you feel like you have a solid enough roster without Chris Dunn needing to be, your 9th or 10th man, then you can waive him at no cost. And I think that would be a great thing to do. You could also have his non-guarantee date be somewhere in July, right, where you can wait to guarantee him until after you've made all your free agency moves. Don't forget the Jazz have 3 first-round draft picks this summer, and those are guaranteed contracts. Jazz might move on from one of those draft picks. We don't know. The Jazz certainly don't know at this point. So we have first dibs on Chris Dunn here, and I think there probably is another NBA team who looks at this 4-game sample and sees what he's doing defensively and saying, that might be useful in some situations. I think we could sign him as our 10th, 11th, 12th man right now, give him a rest of season contract, which is objectively more money. And if I'm Chris Dunn, you'd be stupid not to take that over another 10-day with the Jazz, right? Because that would be something like 4 times as much money, right? and maybe the opportunities, maybe you don't get as much opportunity, but maybe you're playing for a better team and playing high impact minutes at fewer but higher impact minutes matters more to your off-season contract prognostication than another 10-day with the Jazz. So I think the Jazz might actually be competing with that. There frankly there isn't a lot of stuff out there, right? So Goran Dragic, after being waived by the Bulls, will probably sign a rest of season contract with the Milwaukee Bucks, it looks like. The pickings are slim if you're a contending team wanting to sign somebody. So we will see what happens with Dunn. I'd like to keep him. He's been fun. And he surprised me. I was super, super, super low on Chris Dunn at the draft. I was super low with him in Minnesota, super low on him in Chicago. I was weirdly optimistic for him in Atlanta, right? Like, this was before they traded for DeJounte Murray, and I was thinking, you know what? You space a team like that, you put him alongside Trae Young, you could just have Chris Dunn doing Chris Dunn things and Trae Young doing Trae Young things, and you might have a credible first-round, second-round playoff team. And we're, of course, now seeing that you need a lot more than just having a good defender alongside Trae Young. So he's also provided some great home court moments in Utah. Utah's about to go on they're currently on a 6-game road trip. This is the first of 6 games that they will be going on the road for. And check out their schedule here real quick. So those are my thoughts. Kenneth, I was kind of directly responding to your question without mentioning your name. So Kenneth, thank you for the question on Chris Dunn. Frank Jackson, I wish we got to see a little bit more of, especially because I do think there was a spot in the rotation for him, but we just didn't have it. Markkanen was pretty miserable in the first half today. Kind of picked it up a little bit late. Drawing fouls, good free throws today. But I mentioned the turnover. The turnovers were just frankly miserable and cost the team. Markkanen was a team low minus 26. That you don't see those numbers from Markkanen very often. Walker Kessler, 10 points, 11 rebounds, 4 blocks. He was really shutting down the paint, but he got himself in some tough situations. Only 25 minutes for him today. We're getting a lot of Fontecchio and Rudy Gay minutes. Damian Jones played 20 minutes today. There was quite a bit of garbage time involved in this, about 5 or 6 minutes of garbage time. So maybe Kessler plays more minutes, but that not necessarily guaranteed there. Olynyk continues to drive me nuts. Olynyk weirdly had 3 blocks today, but he had his 4 turnovers, and he can't rebound the basketball. It's so frustrating to watch Olynyk be a rebounding presence. He doesn't box out. He doesn't have arms. He doesn't jump. He is always a rebounding detriment on the team. Simone Fontecchio woke up today. He was getting a lot of praise on the broadcast. He shot 5 of 12 today, 4 of 6 from 3. I think he was 3 of 5 during the competitive portion of the game. Moved around well. His defense looked good. He had this a silly block where he went straight up with both hands, and the opposing ball handler for the Thunder just kind of threw the ball into his arms, so he got credited with a block there. I love seeing Fontecchio shoot well because I do think his movement and athleticism are NBA quality. I don't know. I've pretty much settled on him as not a rotation guy yet. And I think Fontecchio needs to be like a holy shit 3-point shooter to subsist in the league. And he has been the opposite of that. I think he's at like 30, or I think he might be even below 30% from 3 this year. And it's hard to be like the reliable 3-point shooter if you're not playing every night. But that's kind of... And maybe he is just frankly a better shooter when he's in Europe or playing for a non-US league where he is just getting regular minutes and regular shots. And it's kind of hard to just be like the guy coming in off the bench 1 every 5 games and like, hey, can you shoot 3 threes? In the beginning of the season when he was asked to do that, he was spectacular at that. So I was like, wow, we might have some juice as like a hired gun coming off the bench and shooting these threes. And he's just completely fallen off over the past 3 or 4 months, and he's going to get a lot of burn over the next few games. He's been miserable over the past few games. Obviously, it came to a nadir the last game against the Spurs, in the loss against the Spurs on Tuesday. 0 points, 0 of 7 from the field, 0 of 5 from 3, 3 turnovers in 20 minutes, which is just, if you're going to have that kind of a role, you can't be turning the ball over 3 times in just 20 minutes. And overall, he is shooting 28% from 3. And in the month of February, he shot 13% from 3. I'm counting it up now. It's 4 for like 38 or something like that. He made 4 threes. He attempted a lot. So he's played plenty of minutes too, right? He's averaging 17 minutes a game in February. And he was only getting up 4 threes a game in 17 minutes, which is really good. Like, that's what you were kind of getting on a Malik Beasley, like that sort of like amount of threes attempted per minute, which is really healthy for an offense. It draws them out. But if you're shooting 13% from 3, frankly, nobody's going to give a shit, and they have not so far. So today was really nice for him. From that perspective, only 1 of 6 from the field outside of 3. I thought he had a couple layups kind of get doinked. I thought he could have been a little better at. His feel for an offense, he kind of, when he gets a longer stint on the court, he makes really good cuts, and he actually has a sneaky good dribble game where he's able to penetrate the paint and force people to move around. Speaking of moving around, I thought Ochai Agbaji actually had his best game of the season when it comes to moving around the perimeter and always staying active. How many times did we see Agbaji just get the ball and he was wide open for a three-point shot? He was not particularly accurate with his three-point shot today, but we've seen him be fairly consistent from 3 over the past few weeks. 2 of 9 from 3. For Agbaji, he started out, I think, 2 of 3, and he just missed all of them coming down the stretch. But he provided credible defense, had a few fouls that I thought were, you'll probably won't get fouls the next time. But he was just circling around the court, always getting wide open threes. He's relocating after offensive rebounds, doing exactly what you're hoping Agbaji would do, which is kind of maybe if you can't be like the pick and roll operator or a good dribble drive guy, you can't just be stand in the corner guy either. Like, that's Jared Vanderbilt's job. If you're going to be a 3-point marksman, you have to figure out, like, where is my ball handler or the guy who has the ball, if he's securing an offensive rebound or whatever, where is he going to be looking to give me the basketball, because I can relocate and get wide open threes, especially in these situations where the defense is so collapsing on Lauri Markkanen, which was we had a lot of double and triple teams today on Markkanen, which is I'll credit some of that for Markkanen's struggles today, but he also made a couple dumb things happen. But Agbaji was doing great, just staying in the sightline of the guys who had the ball, or just kind of letting them know that, hey, I'm wide open over here, and no one within 10 feet of him. So he missed some open threes today that you would hope would be made. And if you want to call this to shooting luck, I think that would be a poor decision. Oklahoma City shot 40% and Jazz only shot 31%. And you're kind of thinking, all right, if the Thunder miss a few more threes and the Jazz make a few more threes, it might be competitive. The Jazz lost by 27 points today, guys. Shooting was not it. It was the Jazz 25 turnovers to the Thunder 7 turnovers. The Thunder was 7 turnovers. This is a young team that's being led by, with no Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, by the way, right? Who is a fabulous offensive engine who will probably make an All-NBA team. But you have Josh Giddey is a reliable point guard. And Josh Giddey, 13 assists to 1 turnover. There just wasn't enough pressure on making those passes difficult. And frankly, I felt like the Jazz contests on 3-point shots, they were average to below average. They weren't horrendous. We didn't have a lot of completely losing guys around the perimeter. I don't think it was that bad, but the Jazz were just like a touch slow in contesting these shots. So it was like they were okay contests. So you had guys... like Isaiah Joe, who is a 3-point marksman. That's what he's in the league for. He jacked up 13 threes today in 27 minutes, just flying around the court. And the contests were there. They were just not useful contests. Dario Saric, Walker Kessler's contests on Dario Saric's threes just weren't super effective. And if you're not going to be a great team at sticking on the men around the perimeter on shooting, then surely that means that you're providing a lot of hands in the lane and getting deflections and steals and everything. And that just wasn't the case. You know, Chris Dunn is credited with 3 steals today. I thought he actually had 4 steals by my count. All 3 or 4 of his steals, if you want to call them that, they were Chris Dunn forced turnovers, right? It was Chris Dunn being spectacular on the defensive end and really reading the play well or poking out a dribble, and they were stellar defensive plays rather than the team collectively kind of forcing Oklahoma City into a bad decision. So if you take Chris Dunn's defensive alacrity away, you're left with just 4 turnovers for the Thunder. And that's a young team. Like, there should be a way to force way more turnovers than that. Josh Giddey plays 32 minutes today, and I mentioned his 13 assists. Life has to be more difficult for him, especially because Josh Giddey is a very poor shooter of the basketball. 0 of 3 from 3 today. So life should have been made way harder for Josh Giddey. I thought... part of the reason I also am interested to see what the Jazz do with their roster spots going forward is I think Talen Horton-Tucker has a useful presence as a backup point guard. He can dribble the basketball a little bit. But his best NBA skill this year has been his defense against like larger ball handlers, I'll call them, right? Not quite shifty point guards, but not quite forward-sized guys either, like Paul George. He's been a really solid defender of the 6'3" to 6'7" types. And when you're giving him this much taxation offensively, I feel like his defense just wasn't there. And I really was looking forward to Talen Horton-Tucker just bothering the shit out of Josh Giddey today. And that just did not happen. Chris Dunn provided a lot of that, frankly. So, kind of rambling here for a minute about players nobody cares about. But that's basically my thoughts on where you're going to get Talen Horton-Tucker in a position to succeed. It's going to be on the defensive end and just wasn't there. So if the Jazz need something, I think it's going to be more ball handling. I was surprised to see Frank Jackson not get any burn in his 10-day contract. Frank Jackson isn't a pure point guard either. He's not like a pass first guy. He's more of a dribble penetration. Maybe call him score first point guard, but not purely score first. So I think the Jazz have a real hole at ball handling. I don't think Colin Sexton's going to play for several weeks, if not the rest of the season. And Jordan Clarkson is on a soft tank injury situation, so we'll see the next time we see him. So the Jazz have some real need for ball handling in a credible way, and that is shown today in the 25 turnovers. Looking at the turnovers against for the past 2 games have been pretty awful. 12 turnovers against, 20, I was like, 12 turnovers, that's not right. 20 turnovers against the Spurs. Talen Horton-Tucker had 7 turnovers against the Spurs. His game log has got to be pretty miserable as far as turnovers are concerned. Yeah, his past 4 games, 6 turnovers, 7 turnovers, 5 turnovers, 4 turnovers, 3 turnovers. That's too many turnovers. I think I'm finally done betting on Talen Horton-Tucker getting a triple-double. Ever since he got the starting nod against Memphis, 32 minutes and a loss, he went 15, 7, and 7 against Memphis. So I started putting some money on Talen Horton-Tucker getting a triple-double. And it was plus 5,000, plus 6,500, plus 7,000, and he goes for 9, 7, and 6 against Oklahoma City in the last time around, and then 12, 6, and 4, 16, 3, and 3, and then 6, 4, and 5 today. So I think I'm done pissing my money away on that one. Just a few bucks just to see what would happen, because at those odds, who knows what would happen. So I also felt like the Thunder really out-talented the Jazz today. The Thunder are young, they're developing, but you have a lot of real talent. Ousmane Dieng is a first-round talent, a lot of athleticism, a lot of stuff going on for him. Surprising was 0 of 3 from 3 today. I think Dieng has a good future in the NBA. Trey Mann is a totally viable backup point guard. He can't shoot, and of course he shot 2 of 2 from 3 today. But 4 assists, 0 turnovers, right? Like that's a backup point guard coming in and doing incredible backup point guard things. And Isaiah Joe, mentioned him, great shooter. Lou Dort kind of kicked our ass, but he's more of an established NBA presence at this point. And runner-up for Rookie of the Year might be Jalen Williams for Oklahoma City. over Walker Kessler. I think it'll be a fun thing to watch who gets second place for Rookie of the Year behind Paolo Banchero, who's surely going to win the award. Jalen Williams was outstanding today. He might have been the Thunder's second best player to get it. He had 20 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 steals and a block, 1 of 2 from 3. He's a defensive menace. I see a lot of Danny Granger in him as far as his ability to score and put the ball on the deck, his size. He does have a good height too. I think he's 6'9" is what he's credited as. 6'6". I think he's a lot taller than that, but he's a big guy. He's built. I think he's going to be a real good forward-sized presence. I know Danny Granger was awfully tall. He was almost 6'9" or 6'10", if I recall correctly. But when I watch Jalen Williams, I think Danny Granger. I think that would be a really good credit for Jalen Williams to get there, and he's a legitimate positive contributor every time he's on the court for the Thunder right now. They have a winning basketball team next year, and they have to really start thinking about if they're going to start winning basketball games. This also could be a road trip that really defines what the Jazz do the rest of the year. The Jazz have been really terrible on the road, including when they were playing well. They are now 11-20 on the road. Thunder are a pretty decent team at home, 18-15. But if the Jazz are 11-20 on the road and they finish, this road trip 11-25 on the road, then they're going to be 31-38 going into the last few games. And I just do not see them overtaxing guys like Colin Sexton at home, and especially not playing Sexton 35 minutes. Like even if Sexton was healthy today, right, quote unquote healthy, you're not seeing Sexton play more than 20 or 25 minutes the rest of the way. Guaranteed. They are not going to stress him. They're going to make sure that his leg is fully healthy going into next year. I mentioned this earlier, but it's just you can't have related injuries on that leg where he suffered the injury to the knee last year. It's all related, and the Jazz are going to treat that leg as all kind of like a related injury to just manage and go forward. So that hamstring is not like Mike Conley's hamstring where we're just kind of touch and go with a hamstring injury. They're focused on that hamstring injury as it relates to the knee, right? And trying to make sure that you're not overtaxing the leg and trying to go into next season completely healthy. So that's a lot of minutes on a blowout loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder on a Friday night. This has been a great Salt City Hoops postcast and beer. This has been a great beer that I get to finish. We got some great games on today, too. Going into the half, Sacramento's up over the Clippers by 8. Can't wait to see how Russell Westbrook's doing in that one. Great game in the Bay with the Pelicans up over the Warriors. And, of course, game I am immediately going to turn to is Memphis-Denver. Game I almost thought about going to, but I was like, I gotta talk about Jazz Thunder. So big Jokic fans over here, big Memphis haters over here. I can't wait to tune into this one as we close out our evening. Glad to be back after a short little break. Had some family illnesses and things going on. I also I play a classical saxophone actually, and I've had a few rehearsals that I've had to go to. So I missed a few Jazz games, but I always watch them. And I'll go ahead and announce it now that I hope to be doing some interesting live stuff the rest of the way to test out a new way of going live for Jazz games, both live Jazz games, and also maybe do some recaps just to test some things out for next season, and I hope you guys join me for that. So just teasing a couple of things. I can't exactly disclose exactly what I'll be doing yet, but this has been a lot of fun to do, obviously Spaces and YouTube, and I'm hoping to keep yelling at you in other formats. So my name is Mark Pereira for Salt City Hoops. This has been the Salt City Hoops live postcast and beer. Blowout loss to the Thunder. 25 turnovers, 17 first half turnovers. Taylor Horton-Tucker and Lowry Markkanen both with 6 turnovers each. Jazz overall kind of a struggle defensively in preventing any pressure on there. Chris Dunn's 10-day contract expires. He finishes up 4 very quality games for the Jazz. His stellar 4 defensive games for Chris Dunn and 4 acceptable offensive games for Chris Dunn, which that has been Dunn's main issue, is like being a complete non-factor offensively. I would call him a completely credible offensive threat for the Jazz over 4 games, combined with, frankly, A to A plus level defense that the Jazz have lacked for 3 or 4 years from the guard position. So we'll see what the Jazz do with Chris Dunn going forward as his 10-day expires tonight. and we'll see what happens to Frank Jackson as well. Until then, the Jazz next game, let's see, pull up their schedule here real quick. At the Thunder, March 5th, 5 p.m. That's Sunday at 5 p.m. Yeah, I'll probably try to do a postcast for that. It's a Sunday. We'll have some fun, have a beer, and see what's going on with the Jazz at the Thunder again. Hopefully we'll get the win for that one. I'm sure most of you are cheering for losses, but I like winning. It doesn't really matter. We can talk more about tanking mechanics next time. Again, Mark Pereira for Salt City Hoops. Y'all have a good night.